Okay, we're going to start out by creating a new workspace in Illustrator. So once you've got Illustrator launched, we need to have a document to work on. You can create that in one of two places. If you go under the File menu, there's File New, or you can click right here where it says Create New, and that will bring up this dialog box that actually runs you through Illustrator's set of presets. So if you're working for a phone or mobile device, here are some presets for different devices. If you're working for the web, here are some presets for different web uses. If you're working for print, here are some standard paper sizes. If you're working for film and video, for example, if you're creating titles for video production, this brings up the right size images for that. If you click on Art and Illustration, this brings up some standard sizes. I'm going to go back to Print and click and just leave it on Letter. You can change the orientation over on the right here. You can also change from points to inches or picas or whatever you choose. For now, I'm going to leave this in points. And once I've made all my choices, I'm going to go down to the bottom and click Create. Now, the other thing I want to do before we start is I'm going to go to the Window menu and click on Workspace. Workspaces are basically an arrangement and set of panels and tools which are used for different purposes. As you can see, there are some suggestions that presets that Illustrator has already put in here. For this one, I'm going to reset Essentials Classic, and the reason for that is it's going to bring up some panels that I will use during this demo, including the Color panel and the Layers panel and the Properties panel. And that way, we're all looking at the same thing here. You don't have to go looking for things. Illustrator, unlike Photoshop, works with vector paths. So unlike Photoshop, which is all pixels, vectors are defined by anchor points and line segments. So it's almost like a connect the dots program. What we're going to do is start with drawing a simple rectangle. So I'm going to go to the Tool panel on the left here, select the Rectangle tool, and just click and drag to draw a simple rectangle. And these are objects. So basically, these points here tell Illustrator the boundaries, and these line segments basically connect them. Two important tools in Illustrator. One is the Selection tool. The Selection tool selects the entire path. So when you click on something with the Selection tool, it highlights all of the points and all of the line segments. Incidentally, these little things here in the corners allow you to make any number of round cornered rectangles just by dragging them forward and backwards. The Selection tool also allows you to scale. And you'll notice that I can distort it when I scale it. If I want to scale it proportionately, I just put my finger on the Shift key and the shape stays the same. I can move it using the black arrow tool. I can also rotate it. You'll notice that when I hover my cursor outside the corner, it turns into a little bent arrow, and then I can turn it. So the black arrow tool selects the entire object and allows you to scale it, rotate it, or move it. The second tool, which is called the Direct Selection tool, has a different function. Now, to unselect something, when you see all these little points here, you'll notice it's selected. To unselect it, just click outside. And when I take my cursor and put it close to the corners with the Direct Selection tool, you'll notice it highlights just that corner point. Unlike the Selection tool, the Direct Selection tool lets you select specific parts of the object so that you can move them around. And everything in Illustrator is infinitely changeable. So you can see that I can take this corner point and move it. If I click away, and then click on the line segment. You can see I'm moving the whole line segment. So the direct selection tool lets you select different parts of the objects. Again, to deselect it, just click away from it, and that will actually unselect it. It's probably the easiest way to do it. So if I click on this corner, I can have just one round corner. So that's the selection and the direct selection tool. Now I'm going to go back to the selection tool here, and I'm going to click on this and select the whole thing. The other thing is that these shapes are defined by their stroke, which is that black outline that you see here, and the fill, which is, in this case, it looks transparent, but it's actually white. The stroke and the fill are at the bottom of the tool panel here. So if you go over to the left, you can see you've got the tool panel here. The solid square, when it's on top, means you're changing the color of the fill. So if I go back to the right here and click on the color panel, you can see when I click on this little color ramp, if you don't see this, click at the top here and make sure it says show options, and that gives you a lot more options here. Also lets you change the CMYK values. If I go back to the tool panel on the left, or if I stay in the color panel and click on the hollow square, I am then changing the color of the stroke, which is the color, the black outline. And now if I click on here, you can't really see it because it's quite narrow, but it changes the color of the stroke from black to sort of turquoise. So the fill is controlled by the solid square, the stroke by the hollow square. If you leave it on stroke for a second, you can also change some attributes of the stroke. So if I go to the stroke panel, again on the right here, again, if you don't have these options, you can toggle back and forth between hide and show options. You can change the width of the stroke. You can change what the corners look like. So if you look at these square corners, you can turn them into round corners or bevel corners. And you can also change whether the stroke is inside the object. So all of the 7-point stroke is inside the object, outside, or centered on the path itself. So those are some options for stroke and fill. Now we'll talk, I'm going to make a later video talking about the pen tool and sketching, but we'll talk about the geometric shapes. So if I go back to the tool panel on the left and hold down my cursor, you will notice that I bring up different options here. You can have a rounded rectangle. A little bit obsolete actually, because of course you can change those corners using the black arrow tool and just sliding those little circles in and out. You can have whatever degree of rounded corner you want. One thing with the geometric objects is if I click on the rounded rectangle tool and click and drag, I'm drawing a shape. If I click and just click on the white area, it actually brings up a dialog box, and it actually lets me say, okay, how big do I want this to be? It actually allows me to put in the corner radius. So the higher the radius, the rounder the corner. When I click OK, it actually draws a rounded rectangle exactly that dimension. That's actually true of all of these. So there's an ellipse tool. Incidentally, with the ellipse and rectangle tools, if you hold down Shift, you get a perfect square or a perfect circle. If you just draw freehand, you get whatever shape ellipse you want. If you click, it actually brings up that dialog box, which lets you do a numeric, an ellipse of a very specific size, if that's what you need. The fourth tool is the polygon tool. Again, if you click it, you can say how many sides you want. So if you want a triangle, you can just put in 3. And the last one is a star tool. The flare tool, actually, I think they put that in there for fun. It's not really all that useful. If you click the star tool, it lets you change the number of points and the radius.